We begin today's shiur 7 lines from the top of Daf Kuf Beis. Before we begin the actual Gemara, let us glance at the side where we have our Nosei Mivneh heading. You'll notice that we have a house shape and a double underline featured. The explanation on the side, Rab over Rav Yosef, Cholkim, B'mash Oma Rav Kana Marav. So you'll see in the house form, you have Rabba and Rav Yosef are emphasized, and each one of them, Rabba and Rav Yosef, will be quoting Rav Kahana in the name of Rav as to what did they say. Be'inyan chalitza b'minol u'b'sandal. Regarding chalitza, using these two different types of shoes. A minol is a leather shoe, soft leather, that covers the entire foot. A sandal is made of hard leather that if it were to rip, it's irreparable, and it doesn't cover the entire foot. It is basically a sole with a, we'll see the issue of having a heel on it comes up in the discussion, and as we saw in the Mishnah, the issue of whether or not it has a heel to it, and it has straps that are attached to, we'll call them rings that are on the side of the sandal. Now, the sandal happens to be the most desirable type of shoe to use for chalitza. The issue concerns, what about the minol? So, according to Rabbah, we've written on the side, Lo choltzin b'minol l'chatchila. Minol is not a first choice. Again, the minol is a closed type shoe made of soft leather. If it were to rip, it would still be able to cling to the foot, as opposed to the sandal. According to Rav Yosef, choltzin ba'afilu chatchila, the minol is good as even as a first choice. Now the Gemara. Omar Rabbo, Omar Rav Kan, Omar Rav. Im Yovoy Eliyahu v'yomar choltzin b'minol. If Eliyahu, the prophet, would come and say that chalitza can be done with a minol, shoymin lo, we would listen to him. That's point aleph. If he were to say ein choltzin b'sandal, we do not use a sandal, ein shomin lo, we wouldn't listen to him. Shikvar noagu ha'om b'sandal. The community, the nation has already used a sandal. Just before we go ahead, structurally, note that Rabbah made 2 points. It was Aleph and Beis. The Beis that Rabbah mentioned was Ein Choltzin B'Sandal. If Elio would say we don't use a sandal, Ein Shomin Lo. If you skip now just another 2 lines, the end of the line you see another Beis, Ein Choltzin B'Sandal, Ein Shomin Lo, Shikvar Noah Goam B'Sandal. Regarding point Beis of Rabbah and Rav Yosef, there is no difference. So when you have multiple factors in a sugya, it's good to know which ones are the point of controversy and which ones are not. So we can de-emphasize point Beis in Rabbah because he and Rav Yosef don't argue over that. However, regarding the minol, so Rabbah says that if Elio would come and say, you can use a minol, so we would listen to him. Now, it's mashma, you can infer from that, and Rashi points this out, that if he wouldn't come and say to use a minol, so we wouldn't use a minol. So according to Rabbah, a minol is not a first choice type thing. You'd need Elio to come and say to use it, otherwise we wouldn't use it. Now, let's continue. Rav Yosef Omer Rav Kana Marav. Rav Yosef quotes, again you see Rav Kana Marav with the double underline, Im Yovo Elio v'yomar. If Elio would come and say, Ein Choltzin b'minol. Note, this is a point of difference. According to Rabbah's version, Elio would supposedly come and tell us, you can use a minol. So this version has, if he would come and say, don't use a minol, shomin lo, we would stop using the minol. But until he comes, we do use it. We'll use it even lechatchila, even as a first choice. Ein choltzin b'sandal, if Elio would say not to use a sandal, ein shomin lo, we would not heed him. Shekvar nohagu ha'om b'sandal, the nation has already chosen, has already adopted using a sandal. My binai, what is the point of difference between Rabba and Rav Yosef? And we already emphasized this before. Here the Gemara asks that. What is the point of difference? Iko binai minol lechatchila. The use of minol as a first choice. According to Rabba, it's not a first choice. According to Rav Yosef, as things stand right now, it is good. It is as good as anything else, as a first choice. In other words, I say anything else means it's as good as a sandal. You can use it as a first choice. According to Rav Yosef, according to Rav Yosef, who says that a minol is good even as a first choice, have we not learned in the Mishnah that if a minol was used, then it's okay, but the language saying that if you used it, it's okay, that's post facto. Di'eved in, if you did it, then it's okay. But not as a first choice. So is that not a problem for Rav Yosef? The Gemara answers, Huadin dafilu lechatchila. Truth is that minol would be good even as a first choice. V'aidi, the boy lemisna seifa, since at the continuation of the Mishnah it taught ban pilya chalitzasa psula, using a cloth type shoe, the chalitza would be unacceptable. The afilu di'eved. There, in fact, it's not good even on a post facto choice as a. It's not good even post facto, meaning it's not good whatsoever. That's as far as the cloth shoe. So Tona Nami Reisha Di'eved. So the Reisha was also using a post facto tone of speech. But one shouldn't infer from the Reisha, which spoke about the minol, that the minol is good only as something used post facto, but it is in fact good even as a first choice. The Gemara continues, uminol lechatchila, using a minol as a first choice for chalitza, tanoi hi. This is a machlokes tanoim. Desanya, and here you have a Tanaic source in which this point of controversy will be mentioned. Desanya, Amar Rabbi Yossi, Pamachas holachti l'Nitziven. Once I went to Nitziven, it's the name of a place. Vatzasi zokein echad, I found an old man or a sage, Amarti lo, and I asked him, Klumata boki Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira, are you knowledgeable in the teachings of Rabbi Yehuda ben Beseira? Amar li, and the elderly man said, Hein. Va'al shulchani hu tadir. Yes, I'm familiar with him, and he eats by me on a regular basis. Klum roisa shechalatz bivama. Have you ever seen him oversee chalitza with a yevama? Omar li roisi shechalatz harbei pamim. I saw chalitza done numerous times. Then I asked, b'minol o b'sandal? Was it a minol type shoe or a sandal kind of shoe? Omar li b'minol. He used a minol. Amarti lo im kain ma ro Rabbi Meir lomar cholza b'minol chalitza sakshera. Then why is it that Rabbi Meir presented the use of a minol as good only post facto, that if it were done, then it's okay? Rabbi Yankiv oimer mishmo. Rabbi Yankiv says in the name of Rabbi Meir, cholzin b'minol lechatchila. You can use a minol even as a first choice. So you see from here, the final opinion was minol is good as a first choice. The opinion expressed just before that was if you did it, it's good, but b'di'eved, only post facto. As we continue in the Gemara, on the side you may notice a taknosei. This is a sub-topic heading, and we've written L'mandomar minol lechatchila lo, according to the opinion that the minol is not a first choice. My time, why is that? So now we turn to the Gemara. The question, you can see, is a 4-line question. Uman de'omar lechatchila lo, according to the opinion that said the minol is not a good first choice. My time, why is that? Ilemo mishum dahavyo panso me'al v'arakso me'al de me'al. The pasuk mentions that the shoe shall be removed me'al raglo, from upon his foot, from over his foot. So the Torah seems to be giving very specific directions of how and from where to remove the shoe. If you might say that the problem is with regard to the shoe, that the pansa, that's the top part of the shoe. We mentioned at the beginning of our shiur the minol is a type of closed shoe. We could say similar to our shoes. When we speak about shoes, we have shoes that cover the top of our foot as well. So that would be considered from on top of the foot. And the minol also happens to have straps, something that might be in the order of similar to the idea of laces, but they're straps that go above the top of the shoe. And the Yevamos, the sister-in-law, she has to undo these straps and then remove the shoe. So that maybe the problem of the shoe is that the pansa is considered me'al raglo, but the araksa, the straps, are me'al de me'al. In other words, that's above that which is above. V'ha-torah amra me'al. And the Torah says that she shall remove the shoe from me'al raglo, v'lo me'al de me'al, but not from above the above. Well, if that's the pshat, if that's the problem, then why do you say that the shoe is good post facto? Even as a second choice, it should be no good. It shouldn't be good even post facto. And that's not true. One will agree that if it was used, it's okay. So, what is the problem with the minol? Answer, number one, Gzeira mishul minol merupat. We're afraid that it might tear. And that's a merupat is a situation where the leather cracks, tears. Rashi says merupat mevuka. Mevuka split, korua, or torn, milamalo, from above. The kevan de rochich, since it's a softer material, afagav de korua, even though it's torn, meisiv le'akari, it still will cling unto the foot. Aval sandal shehu kosher, the sandal which is made of hard leather, ein yachol liyashva raglo mishenivchas. If it cracks, it won't cling to the foot anymore. V'leko lemigzar midi, and then there's no, and as a result of that, the sandal is not something that we're fearful that after it tears, it'll still remain on the foot. Now, I think we should make the assumption that the shoe that's torn, even though physically it appears to be on the foot, it's not considered truly on the foot. And the Torah wants the Yevamos to be the one responsible for removing the shoe from the foot, as opposed to a torn shoe which would fall off automatically. So, in the case of the minol, we're fearful that you'll have a situation that it could be torn. If it tears, it'll still appear to be remaining on the foot. And as we said before, then you have a situation where it's not as if the Yevamos, the sister-in-law, is really the one removing the shoe. But a mistake could occur. Not so with regard to a sandal. So with regard to the sandal, there's no fear of this situation happening. Inami, another possible problem with the minol is mishum chatzi minol, because of it turning out to be a half a shoe. Omar Rav, ilav de chamise, if I had not seen, chamise is to see, if I had not seen lechavivi, chavivi is a term referring to Rav's uncle, the famous Rabbi Chia. If I hadn't seen chavivi, my uncle Rabbi Chia, the cholatz besandal, the is law shinsin, that he used a sandal that had shinsin. Shinsin are straps. Ano lo havoi chalitzna, I wouldn't practice the chalitza, elo besandal detaya, the mahadik tfei. I wouldn't do chalitza other than with the sandal of the Arabs, which is a type of sandal that clings tightly to the foot. And from the context, it would appear that this kind of sandal of the taya doesn't employ the straps in order to keep it tightly affixed to the foot. Maybe we should have mentioned earlier, before we began this sugya, that the sugya would be made much easier if we had illustrations that accompanied it. So, in the absence of illustrations, we'll have to employ our imagination from time to time. The Gemara continues, V'hai didon, means our chalitza shoes, Afal gav the is bei chomrasa. Let's take a look at Rashi. Afal gav the is bei chomrasa, kesher kashur al sfasav. A knot that is tied to its rim, uma'amidoi shelo yetze min haregel. These knots help it such that the sandal doesn't fall off the foot. Afilu hachi b'shas chalitza katrinon bei misna. Even so, at the time of chalitza, we attach to it a misna, a strap, ki hechi detesihi v'tishri, so that there is an opportunity for the Yevama to come along and undo something, the hodar tachlos, and then remove the shoe, v'teheve chalitza ma'alya. That's the best form of chalitza. Now, so that my understanding from this Rashi is that the sandal that we have has in it some type of permanent knot that remains and enables the shoe to cling onto the foot. But nevertheless, we want the Yevama to be actively involved in the undoing of the shoe from the foot, so that we attach this item called the misna, a type of strap that she will undo and then remove the shoe from the foot. Let's see now in the Gemara. Afagav the is bei chomrasa. This our shoe, even though it has the chomrasa, which are these knots that cause the shoe to be affixed firmly to the foot. Katrinon bei misna. We attach to it a strap, ki hechi detevi chalitza semalyasa, so that you have a high quality job of shoe removal being done. The following couple words are a siman. These are key words that introduce the Memros, comments made by Rav Yehuda in the name of Rav, as the Gemara continues. And hence on the side under our nosei, Mivneh heading, we have the topic heading and structural note combined into one, where we feature the diamond Sidro Shel Halachas Rav Yehuda Marav, a series of halachas in his name, Beinyan Chalitza Saminal, with regard to the removal of the shoe. The names you can see appear in diamonds, and this marking scheme will continue down the first third of Omid Beis. Omar Rav Yehuda Marav, HaToras Yevama Lashuk, the element that enables the Yevama to be discharged from her Yibum bond and enable her to marry out into the public. B'shmitas roiv ha'okev. It's with the removal of the majority of the heel. The Rashi says, B'shmitas rov ha'okev, kagon she shamta es rov ha'okev min hasandal. Most of the heel was removed from the shoe. Afal pi shelo chaltzosei kulo, even though the shoe hasn't been fully removed. Hutra, that is the point in time that she officially becomes allowed to marry someone else. The Gemara asks, Meisvei, Hutru Ritzuos Minov Sandal. Hutru means they came loose. She did not undo them. Oy Shishomat Roiv Horegel. Or he, the man, the brother-in-law, removed the majority of his foot, and she finished it off. She took it off completely. Chalitza psula. the chalitza is not done properly, so that if the straps get undone by themselves, where namely she didn't undo them, or he removed most of the shoe and she simply finished off the job, we say that's not acceptable. And now we infer. Taima deshomat hu. The problem here is that he removed the majority of the shoe. Ha shamta he. If she removed the shoe from the majority of the foot, kshera. That is what would be a good chalitza. And now we emphasize the problem. Rov haregel in, rov ha'akev lo. In order for the chalitza to be good, she would have to remove the shoe from the majority of the foot, not the majority of the heel. So that this is a problem. The inference we're drawing from this Tanaic source is a problem for Rav. Rav was enabling her to become muteres, to become permitted with less shoe removal. The Gemara says, lo, the way we drew our conclusions is not correct. Rather, hainu rov haregel, hainu rov ha'akev. The term rov haregel is interchangeable with rov ha'akev, rov of the heel. V'mai kori lei rov haregel. Why would you say the majority of the heel is called the majority of the foot? Answer: dekula chaylo dekara olei dochis. That chayla is the strength, the entire strength of the kara of the foot is resting upon, is pressed upon, or resting upon the heel. So that when we speak about rov of the foot is a term that's interchangeable with the heel, because the heel is that which supports the foot. The Rashi says, dochis nismach, it relies upon, rests upon, loshen dochis. Now we continue in the Gemara, Messiah lei l'Rabyanai. That which we said above concerning the straps getting undone and the chalitza not being good is a Tanaic source that supports Rav Yanai's teaching. The Rav Yanai, bein shehitir hu v'shamta he, whether he undid the straps and she removed the shoe, bein shehitira he v'shamat hu, or she undid the straps and he removed the shoe, chalitza sapsula. Either one of those would constitute an invalid chalitza, ad tatir he v'tashmid he, until she does the undoing of the straps and she does the removal of the shoe. As we continue in the Gemara, we notice a new geometric form, and on the side, under the Mivneh heading, we have this crown shape. Shnei she'elos be'inyan hasoras hanal me'aregel. 2 questions regarding the removal of the shoe from the foot. Boi Rebbe Yanai Korasehu Mahu. Instead of untying the straps and removing the shoe in the, we'll say, the normal fashion, she tore the shoe off his foot. Sarfasehu Mahu. Literally, she burnt the shoe off his foot. Rashi cites that what if she threw a hot coal on the shoe when it was on his foot and it burnt the shoe off his foot. Gilui kara bo'inon vo'ika is the goal to expose his foot, and that has been accomplished. Odilmo chalitza bo'inon voleka, or must it be the removal of the shoe, or the slipping off of the shoe, and that is lacking in these cases. Teku. So that remains unresolved. Bomine Rabbi Nechemya me Rabba. Rabbi Nechemya asks a question of Rabba. Shnei min olim ze al gav ze mahu. 2 shoes on his foot. What is the din? Heichidami. Well, what are the details? He lema the shalfisei le'eloi v'koi tasoi, that she removed the upper shoe and the lower shoe remains. That can't be. Me'al omar rachmana v'lo me'al de me'al. The pasuk mentioned, and we cited this pasuk earlier. V'choltza nalo me'al ragloi. Me'al raglo, the pasuk says, from upon his foot, not from that which is above that which is above his foot. So the removal of the outer shoe, leaving the lower shoe still on his foot, wouldn't be sufficient. Lo tzricha. So the question is not that, but rather dekara say le'oloi, v'shalfa say letatoi, v'koi iloi mai. What she did was tore the upper shoe in such a way that she could now slip off the lower shoe with the upper shoe remaining there. Chalitza bo'inon bo'ika. Does the Torah expect shoe removal from above, from upon his foot, and that has been done here? O dilma giluye kara bo'inon v'leka, or is the goal to expose the foot, and that's lacking in this case? You'll notice that this second possibility, giluye kara bo'inon, is similar to the first of the two possibilities in the previous question. The Gemara continues at the top of Omid Beis. Omi ika ki hai gavna. The Gemara asks, what kind of question are you asking? Could there be such a thing? So the Gemara says, yes, there could be things like that. The chazua rabbanan, the Rav Yehuda. The Rabbanan noticed Rav Yehuda, the nofak b'chamisha zuzi muki l'shuka. He went out into the market with 5 pairs of muki, some type of footgear. Rashi says, uses a foreign word, a French word for the word muki, and he says kashim heim v'chein b'loshen aravikar in the minolim al mok. So it's like some type of footgear, and for our purposes, Rav Yehuda is described as having worn 5 of them. So if you're asking about it, could it be that a person would have 2 shoes, one on top of the other? Yes, such a thing could be. Omar Rav Yehuda Omar Rav Yevamos shehigdila bein ho'achin. You can have a situation where the Yevama, as a girl, as a youngster, grew up amongst the brothers. Muteres linose le'echad min ha'achim. She can marry one of those brothers. In other words, we have a situation where there was a girl, we'll say a young girl, married one of the brothers, and he died, leaving no children. And we say that she is able to marry one of the surviving brothers, even though she grew up in the same house with them. Now, you're asking, what's the problem? What's the issue over here that we have to even bother mentioning this? So here it is. The ein chosheshin shema cholza sandal le'echad mehem. And we don't worry, we're not concerned that maybe over the in the course of time she removed the shoe from one of them. So you have to imagine some type of intimate household, and she is growing. She's married to one of the brothers, and she lives amongst within this family. And after the husband died, she was still in the same household with the other brothers. We don't have to worry that maybe she removed the shoe from one of them, in a sense, doing an act of chalitza. And as such, so Rav says that she can marry one of the surviving brothers. The this situation is featured on the side in our topic heading, Ha'im boi kavona b'shas chalitzas hanal. Do we require intent at the time that the shoe is being removed? You're going to notice that in this sugya, structurally, we have a volcano shape, and this represents there are two lashonos on how to draw an inference from this. So the first lashon, the first version, taimo delo chazinon. According to what HaRav Yehonasan says, is that what the impression that he gives us is that, well, we didn't see any shoe removal, and therefore we don't have to take it into consideration. We don't have to suspect maybe she did it. But all of this is because we didn't see her removing a shoe. Ha chazinon. But had we seen her removing a shoe, chayshinon, are you saying then we should suspect that was an act of chalitza? We take a look at Rashi on the second line from the top. Ha chazinon, the cholza, chayshinon, dilma chalitza hi, lefoslo aleim be'afagav delo niskavnu lechalitzas mitzvah. So, is this really the case? Rav Yehonasan tells us, not having seen anything, she happened to be in the same household with the other brothers, so we don't have to suspect that maybe she did a shoe removal. But had we seen her remove a shoe, does that mean then we should consider that an act of chalitza, even though there was no intent? But we have learnt, bein sheniskavein hu v'lo niskavno hi, whether he had chalitza intentions but she did not, bein sheniskavno hi v'lo niskavein hu, or she had intentions of releasing herself through a shoe removal but he, the brother-in-law, did not. Chalitza psula ad sheyiskavnu shneim kechad. The chalitza is invalid until they both have chalitza intention. When we say chalitza intention, we're simply using a shortened form of an intention that this act shall be the means of being matir her, allowing her to marry into the public. So the Gemara responds, Hochi ka'omar. Thusly, Rav was really saying, Afal gav de chazinon, even if we saw her remove a shoe from one of the brothers, ein chosheshin shema kivnu. We don't worry that maybe they both had intent. Ve'ika di amri. The Rashi on the third line from the top says Ve'ika di amri. This is an introduction of the second version. In Vadai Taimo Delo Chazinon de Cholza. Rav's heter is because we didn't see. We in fact did not see. Ha Chazinon de Cholza, but if we saw her remove the shoe from one of the surviving brothers, Chayshinon Dilmo Niskavnu Mifsol Alayu, we do suspect that maybe they had chalitza intention and she would not be allowed to marry them anymore. So now we continue in the Gemara. V'iko de'amri taimo delo chazinon. Ha chazinon chosheshin. Had we in fact seen it, the sister-in-law removed the shoe from one of her brothers-in-law, we would concern ourselves that maybe they had kavana. Udekatana boy kavana, and that which the source said that you do require intent. Hanimili l'shtiru la'almo. We should point out then, according to this lashon, the heter of Rav Yehonasan was simply because we didn't see any shoe removal taking place. But had we been witness to shoe removal, that would have been enough that to answer her on one of the brothers. Now, you'll still ask, if we saw, does that mean there was intent? So, didn't the source say that we need to have positive intent for it to work, and that we don't know to be over here? So the Gemara qualifies that and says, Hani mili lishtur d'alma. The need for positive intent for the shoe removal to be a formal chalitza, that's in order to allow her to marry someone else. But as far as the brothers are concerned, mifsala, she does become disqualified, even though we didn't hear any expressed formal intent. It's enough that we saw the widow, the sister-in-law, removing the shoe from one of her brothers-in-law, that it would be enough to render her unfit to continue with Ibum, with the marriage. Omar Rav Yehuda Omar Rav, sandal hatofur bepishton, a sandal that's sewn together with flax. Rashi on the first narrow line says hatofur bepishton shetofur besocho beged pishton kain shetofur besocho levodim. According to the first lashon, there's a lining that was sewn into the shoe. That the sandal was sewn together like our shoes are sewn together. So Rav Yehuda Rav says if it was sewn together with pishtan, ein cholzen bo, it's unfit for chalitza. Shenemar, the pasuk says v'analech tachash. The tachash is a creature, is an animal, and hence na'al, which the pasuk v'analech, na'al is defined as something that's animal related, and hence the pishtan, which is flax, it's a plant, it's the source of linen, would not be acceptable for the chalitza shoe. Maybe if you're citing this pasuk v'analech tachash, maybe the chalitza shoe must be made only from that creature known as the tachash and not from anything else. The Gemara answers, Nal riba. The presence of the word Nal multiple times indicates that we include more than just tachash. Questioning now riba afilu kol mili nami. If now is coming to include more than just the tachash, so include everything, and allow the pishtan to be an acceptable material in the making of the shoe. Well, im kain tachash mayahanile. If you're going to say that we're coming to include everything, so then what benefit do we have, or what effect is there from the presence of the word tachash, which is in fact an animal, which is limiting? So you have on the one hand an inclusive factor, and that enables us to include all other kinds of animals, but you also have a limiting factor. The inclusive factor was the ribuy of now, and the restrictive factor is the fact that tachash is cited, thereby excluding plant materials. Bo minei Rebbe Elazar meirav. Hu shel or v'tarsioisov shel seor mahu. Let us say the basic sandal is made of or of leather, and tarsiosov, Rashi says those are the ritzuosov, the straps, that they are made of seor, of hair, animal hair. Mahu. What about that? Omar lei milo karinon bei vanalech tachash. Would we not be able to refer to that, the pasuk of shoes made of tachash? The hairs come from the animal. It's not a plant source. So the Rashi says the seras minoitzu shalizim, from goat hairs. So doesn't this conform to the shoe requirement? Well, the Gemara says if you're saying that straps made of goat hairs are kosher, then yachi kulo shel seor nami. Then a shoe made entirely of goat hair should be kosher. And we don't say that. The Gemara says, Hahu karka mikri. That's not referred to as a shoe. It has a different name for it altogether, making it a separate category of footgear beyond the realm of a na'al. Omar le Rav Kahana l'Shmuel. On the side of the Gemara, we should note under the Mivneh structure, because here you'll see double underlines that appear. These are kushios mipsukim al ha di anu meforshim es hamila v'choltzu inyan shel hasara ushlifa. We've been working with the assumption that the pasuk that says v'choltza nalo me'araglo, v'choltza means the removal of a shoe. Who says that v'choltza means removal of? Maybe it means something else, and we'll see the Gemara's suggestion. Now the Gemara. Omar le Rav Kahana l'Shmuel. Mimai dehai v'choltza nalo me'al ragloi. Who is to say that this pasuk, where you see the word v'choltza mishlafhu, removal, dechtiv v'choltzu es ha'avonim asher bohen hanega, where in fact there is precedent for the word v'choltzu, or the root of the word cholatz, ches lamed tzadi, meaning removal. There is precedent for that. You find it in the case of a house that's been afflicted by tzoras, and in the procedure of dealing with that issue, it says you shall remove the stones that have the nega, the affliction. The ema, but we want to suggest an alternative, zeruzi hu, that it has to do with strengthening. Rashi says zeruzi hi shenotloso me algabi karka umaniloso baraglo. In fact, it would mean the opposite, that she picks a shoe up from the ground and puts it on his foot. Dichtiv hechotsu meidchem anoshim latzava. Remove from the people men for the army. In other words, you're choosing people to function as soldiers. So that it's a lotion of ziruz, means to strengthen something, to increase something. So maybe that's the idea of chalitza sanal in the pasuk. V'chol sanalo would mean that, as Rashi says, she takes the shoe from the ground and puts it on his foot. The Gemara answers, Hasam nami, there, the pasuk that you cited, in fact, means removal. Shlufi mi beisa lekrova, remove from their houses to the war front. So that hechotz meidchem anoshim latzava, in fact, means like the pasuk v'choltzu es havonim, removal of, and hence our pasuk would mean removal of shoe. The Gemara asks v'haksiv yechaletz oni be'onyoi. Now Rashi says, "Klomar yizar zenu v'yitein lo koach." Strengthen the man who's impoverished in his state of poverty. So you see that yechaletz means strengthening. The Gemara says no. In fact, over there it's a loshon of removal. Bischar onyo. What the pasuk is saying, that in exchange or in reward for him suffering poverty, Yechotzo midino shel gehenim, he'll be removed from the pain of purgatory after he dies. So that as a result of enduring a life of poverty during his lifetime, he'll be spared, removed from the pain of Gehenim. Ella, a question, Hadichtiv choyne malach Hashem soviv lireya vayechaltzeim. The pasuk would seem to mean that the angel of Hashem surrounds those that are God-fearing and strengthens them. So the Gemara says no, it actually means removal. B'schar yereyav, in reward for their being God-fearing, yechaltzeim midina shel gehenim, they will be spared from the judgment in purgatory. Elahadichti vatzmosayach yechlitz. Now, in this pasuk, it would seem that there's an indication of your bones being strengthened. The Omar Rav Ozer zu me'ula shebebrachos. This is the best of the blessings. The Omar Rava, and Rava explains Zeruze Garmi, strengthening of bones. So that why couldn't v'choltzanalo in fact mean strengthening? Or as we saw before in the Rashi, putting on the shoe. The Gemara says in mashma hochi umashma hochi. The truth is that a word with that root, ches, lamed, tzadi, cholatz, has both mashmoyos, both impressions can be derived from that word. Both connotations exist. The hacha, here in the case of the Yevama, salka daitach zruzihu, if you were to think that it means in fact strengthening, imkein lichtoiv rachmana v'cholza nalo biraglo. The shoe is then fastened upon his foot. And it doesn't say that though. It doesn't say biraglo onto his foot. It says, the pasuk actually says me'al raglo. The Gemara questions though and says, that's not convincing. Ikasav rachmona biraglo, had the Torah used that word, have amina biragloi in b'shoikoi loi. I would have thought then that the halacha of chalitza is limited to the actual foot and not to the shok. The shok is that part of the foot beneath the knee. Therefore, kasav rachmona me'al raglo dafilu b'shoko. Even from the shok, there could be the mitzvah of chalitza performed in the case of a person whose foot was amputated. So the pasuk couldn't have used biraglo because I would have lost this meaning. The Gemara says, well, if that's the case, im kain lichtoiv rachmana bi me'al raglo. If you want to push your point that the pasuk could still have meant putting the shoe on the foot, and we argued if you're going to say that, then I'm going to lose the shok idea. Well, the pasuk then should have said bi me'al raglo. My me'al raglo. The fact is, the pasuk doesn't say bi me'al; it says me'al raglo. Shma mino. This is therefore conclusive. Mishlafu. It means removal of the shoe. So it's the word v'cholatz isn't the giveaway, because as we said before, v'cholatz has that dual connotation. But since the pasuk said v'cholza nalo me'al raglo, the me'al is the giveaway. That shows us that here it has to mean removal from. The mem indicates from, removal from. Omar lei hahu mino l'Rab Gamliel. There was a heretic or early Christian that approached Rabbi Gamliel, and he says, Amo decholatz lei more minei. You are a nation, the Jewish people, that the Almighty has removed Himself from them. Dichtiv, the pasuk says, Bitzonchem, Bitzonom uvivkoram yelchu levakesh es Hashem v'lo yimtzo cholatz mehem. So this, of course, is in line with Christian theology, that the Almighty has abandoned, has left the Jewish people, has, we'll say, exchanged them for another people. And that's what this heretic or Christian was trying to say. From this pasuk, you see that the Almighty has abandoned the Jews. Amar le shoite. So Ramliel says, you fool. Mi ksiv cholatz loi. Is that what it says? Cholatz mehem ksiv. Now, had the pasuk said cholatz lo, then we would have had what chalitza represents. Chalitza is a severing of a bond. It's a situation where the brother-in-law frees where through the chalitza the sister-in-law is now free to marry someone else. Well, had it said in the pasuk that you are citing cholatz lo, So then there would have been that connotation that the Almighty allowed a chalitza ceremony to take place, so to speak, figuratively. Cholatz mehem ksiv. However, the actual verse reads cholatz mehem. Now, if you apply that speech form to chalitza, you know what comes out? V'ilu Yevama decholtzu achim. A Yevama where the brother removed his shoe, where the brother did the removal, which is what the language of the pasuk indicates, that the Almighty, He did the removal. Well, if that happened in a case of chalitza, midi mashosha isbe, would it have any meaning? That would be a useless chalitza. The woman has to remove the shoe. And if the brother-in-law removes the shoe, then it has no severing value of severing of that bond. So, since the pasuk in reality describes the Kodesh Baruch Hu as removing himself, so to speak, that doesn't have any effectiveness in creating a real break, and hence the Almighty is still bound up with the Jewish people. The Gemara continues with a quote from the Mishnah, Be'anpilya chalitzos psula. On the side we have a topic heading, Birur al hodikotoni, a clarification regarding that which it says in the Mishnah, Be'anpilya chalitzos psula, demashma shanpilya lav minohu. This implies that the anpilya, which is a type of cloth shoe, is not a shoe. And as we have here, and this is a point that we mention very often in the case of Gemara learning, in the context of our Gemara marking shiurim, that one has to be very careful to not fall into the trap of simple translation, but understand that we're primarily interested in halachic categories. So even though in English the word shoe can apply to all kinds of different materials, we're dealing with halachic considerations. Does something qualify as a minol with all its halachic ramifications, including which being used in chalitza? Yes or no? So now the Gemara continues. L'meimra, our Mishnah seems to say, Danpilya lav minolhu, that an anpilya is not a minol. The Mishnah said that chalitza done with an anpilya, the removal of an anpilya from the brother-in-law's foot, would not be effective whatsoever. And hence it would sound that it's not categorized as a minol, because a minol does create a severing of the yibum bond. So our Mishnah would seem to indicate that an anpilya is not a minol whatsoever. Utna nami, in fact we have a Tanaic source that would indicate that. Ein ha-torah nichnas, in the Beis Hamikdash there was an office, a chamber that contained the monies, we call it the temple treasury, and there was a movement of money from different containers that took place, as described in Masechet Shkolim and in other Gemaras in the Shas. Here we say, Ein ha-torem nichnas lo bepargoid chofus v'lo b'anpilya. He's not to enter that chamber with a pargoid chofus. Rashi says it's a type of shirt or tunic that has a border to it, a folded up, we'll say rim or border to that particular kind of garment. We want to have a smooth, borderless type garment. So he doesn't enter with this pargud chofus, v'lo b'anpilya, the ein sorach lomar, and it goes without saying, he's not to enter b'minol v'sandal, l'fishay nichnosim b'minol v'sandal azora. And minol and sandal, besides the problem that could arise by being in the temple treasury, those are are invalid altogether when it comes to entering the Beis Hamikdash. One is not allowed to enter the Beis Hamikdash with a minol or a sandal. Now, maybe just one more word of background to this particular source. This garment, for example, the Pargud Chofus, if a person entered the treasury with this kind of garment that has cuffs to it or borders to it, that could arouse suspicion that the individual walked in there and took out from there some souvenirs, i.e. coins that he tucked into the border of the garment. So in order for a person to be free of any suspicion, he goes in with a borderless, smooth type garment. And the source says that one doesn't go in there with the Pargud Chofus nor with an Anpilya. Now the fact that the source teaches Anpilya in contrast, Rashi adds, by the way, that the Anpilya, this type of cloth shoe or stockings, is also something that lends itself to suspicion. Namely, someone could slip some of the coins into that and walk out, and we want to avoid all suspicion. But the phrasing that you see in this source says not with an Anpilya, and all the more so obvious not to enter with a minol or a sandal. So you see that the Anpilya is something else. Ve'raminu. Now we raise a contradiction from a source that deals with Yom Kippur. It says here, Echad minol v'sandal ve'anpilya, whether it be a minol, a sandal, or an Anpilya, lo yitayel bohem. One should not stroll around in them, walk within them. Lo mibayas labayas, velo mimita lamita. Not from house to house, not from room to room, and not from bed to bed. On Yom Kippur, there is a requirement to be one should be without shoes. So in this source, you see that minol, sandal, piyur are taught all together. And on Yom Kippur, we know that there is a prohibition of something we call ne'ilas sandal, wearing of shoes, so that wearing the Anpilya would be a violation of the wearing of shoes. So Anpilya is a minol, according to this. Omar Abaye. So Abaye explains the is be ksisi umishum tanug. The objection to wearing the Anpilya on Yom Kippur is not because it's considered a na'al, but rather because Yom Kippur is a day where one is to refrain from pleasure, we'll say. The mitzvah of the Torah is inui, it's called. Ta'anu es nafsho sechem. That we're supposed to experience a form of deprivation, of suffering, deprivation on Yom Kippur. And with the ksisi are pads, soft material, so that this Anpilya that what has in it, the ksisi, is a type of comfort that one gets from it, and that would be in violation of the laws of Yom Kippur. So that's Abaye's explanation, that Anpilya is not nal, but it's a separate problem of ta'anug, of enjoyment and pleasure. Omar le Rava challenges Abaye, says, Omishum ta'anug below minol b'yom kippur mi'asiri. Is it so that pleasure that's non-shoe related is asur on Yom Kippur? Is that really so? That's not true. When we speak about Yom Kippur as being a day of deprivation, it's quite specified what type of deprivation. But the fact that someone enjoys himself on Yom Kippur, that's not a violation of Yom Kippur. Rabba bar Rav Huna korach sudra akare v'nofik. On Yom Kippur, Rabba bar Rav Huna wrapped a sutra, a turban, soft material. He wrapped it around his foot on Yom Kippur and walked out like that. So that just the fact that his foot was experiencing comfort by being wrapped in the sutra, that's not a problem. Elo Omar Rava. Lo Kashya. We have to answer the seeming contradiction between the two sources above. The first source, which said Veloba Anpilya, indicating that the Anpilya was in contrast to a shoe, because in that source it said Ve'in Sarach Lomer B'minol, the sandal. And the second source, the Yom Kippur source, which indicates the Anpilya is a shoe. So he says there's no contradiction. Kan b'Anpilya she'or, kan b'Anpilya shel beged. In the Yom Kippur source, it's an Anpilya that's made of leather. And Yom Kippur is a day where one is to avoid footgear containing leather. And the source dealing with the Trumas Halishka, with the temple treasury, that's B'Anpilya Shel Beged, it's made of cloth. Hachi Nami Mistabra, and in fact that's very likely. Di'ilo Tema Hachi, if you don't use this distinction, then Kashya Yom HaKippurim Yom HaKippurim, you're going to find an inherent contradiction within the topic of Yom Kippur Desanya. The source says, Lo Yatayel Adam Bekur Dekisin Besoch Beiso. A person should not stroll around with kurdekisin or some type of, maybe they're slippers, they're very thin shoes. It's a very thin type shoe. Rashi says, Minolim dakim shalom tachas minolim ovim logain min amayim v'nikroyim underschuch beloshen Ashkenaz. In German, they're called underschuch. Underschuch means under the shoes, and so it's some kind of maybe elaborate sock that one wears before he puts a thick shoe above them, and it's to protect from water. So on Yom Kippur, one is not to stroll around with kurdekisin in his house. Avol metayel hu ba'anpilin besoch beso. So here you have a source, a Tanaic source, regarding Yom Kippur, allowing a person to be metayel with anpilin. Now, just a few lines above, if you scan up, about 6 lines up, 7 lines up, you have a source where you see Anpilya is dashed, underlined, and said there, not to be Metayel with Anpilya on Yom Kippur. And here it says Metayel, yes, to stroll around with Anpilya on Yom Kippur. Elolav Shma Mino. So we have to conclude, Kan b'Anpilya she'or, Kan b'Anpilya shel beged. When you're dealing with Anpilya made of leather, that is prohibited on Yom Kippur. The Anpilya made of beged, of cloth, is allowed on Yom Kippur. Tanya Chavose the Rav, and we have a Tanaic source which will support Rava. Cholza b'mino hanifram shechoife es roiva regel. If the removal was done, she removed from the brother-in-law's foot a minol that was nifram. Nifram is an expression that has to do with something that's torn or frayed, and it covers the majority of the foot. Besandal hanifchas shemekabel es rov regel, or a sandal that's been broken. But most of the foot, the majority of the foot, fits into it. Besandal shel sha'am, a sandal made of sha'am material. V'shel siv. Siv is a fiber that grows on palm trees. Bekav hakitea, or the prosthetic foot of an amputee. B'mok. B'smichas raglayim. B'anpilya shel or. The mok, Rashi gives a French word for that. It's made of felt, and it's hard and protects the foot. Smichas haraglayim, Rashi says, Smichas haraglayim, Rashi 4 lines from the bottom says, Misha mahalech biyodov v'goris raglov, someone whose feet are incapacitated, and he uses his arms in order to move from place to place, and his feet drag on the ground. So Isalahem smichas shel eitz, he prepares for his feet so that they don't become bruised because of their dragging on the ground. So some type of wooden support is made for them. O shel or umachnis l'socha, or something, a leather protection, and the feet are slipped into this. What else is mentioned in this list? B'anpilya shel or, v'achaletzes min hagodol, bein omeid, bein yoshev, bein muta, whether he's standing, he's sitting, or he's leaning. V'achaletzes min asuma, or the removal of a shoe from a blind brother-in-law. Chalitzosa ksheira. In all of these cases, the chalitza is acceptable. Avol b'minol hanifram she'ein choifes roifa regel, a minol that's been frayed and doesn't cover the majority of the foot. B'sandal hanifchas she'ein makabel is roifa regel. Again, a sandal that's broken and doesn't receive the majority of the foot. Ubesmichas hayodayim. Smichas hayodayim, Rashi at the bottom of Kuf Beis Amid Beis. These are for one's arms. It's an arm protection. It might be made of leather. And as the person is, we mentioned before, a person whose feet have become disabled, so he's dragging himself along by maneuvering with the arms. So he has an arm protection device. So the use of that in chalitza, you'll see, is not acceptable. Uban pilya shel beged, and here you see we underlined this as we had dashed on the bottom of the previous Omid Beis, Kuf Beis Omid Beis, Ampilya Shel Or, and here you see Ampilya Shel Beged is mentioned, the Ampilya made of cloth, the Chayletzes Min HaKoton, or the removal of the shoe from a minor who is a brother-in-law, Chalitzasa Psula. If the brother-in-law is a minor, so he is not a candidate, we'll say, for Chalitza, which would free her to marry someone else. What's the point of having brought in this source? We see a support to Rava. Here you see a source that makes a clear distinction between Ampilya Shel Or versus Ampilya Shel Beged, just like Rava said. The Gemara asks a question. This question lasts a couple of lines, and the issue at hand is, who is the author of that which we had learned? In other words, we had learned a Tanaic source, but there's no name in it. So the Gemara asks, Kav Hakitea Moni, the source in which we saw the prosthetic for the amputee is as being considered kosher for chalitza. In other words, it's called a min'al. Who would be that? Who says that? Rebbe Meir he. This would be in accordance with Rebbe Meir, Disnan, Hakitea, the amputee, Yotzei Bekav Shelo, Divrei Rebbe Meir. That on Shabbos, which is the topic of this source, it is permissible for the amputee to ambulate with his kav, with the prosthetic. And Rabbi Yossi Ozer, Rabbi Yossi does not allow that. So you see from the fact that according to Rabbi Meir, he's allowed to walk around, he can go out into a public thoroughfare with the kav. It is a form of clothing, a shoe item, which of course the person's allowed to wear his shoes, and he's not considered transferring the clothing he's wearing from one domain to another, whereas carrying other articles would be prohibited. For the fact that Rabbi Meir says that the kitea, the amputee, can go out on Shabbos from his house to a public domain with the kav, with the prosthetic foot, that indicates it's a type of shoe for him. Rabbi Yossi asers. So as far as the authorship of kav, of the kitea being considered a foot, that would indicate the opinion of Rabbi Meir. Be'anpilya shel beged, this source that said that using Ampilya shel beged is puzzle, this would be in accordance with the opinion of the Rabbanan. Rabbi Meir, you see, since he says that the kav of the kitea is considered a nal, so you see that in Rabbi Meir's mind, the pasuk that we cited before, v'analech tachash, which meant animal products like leather, is not specific. It's not limiting the we didn't mention, but the prosthetic of the amputee victim is made of wood, and he's saying that the wooden apparatus is considered na'al. So once you say that a wooden apparatus is considered na'al, according to Rebbe Meir, the analech tachash posuk doesn't limit me to leather. And once I'm not limited, so according to Rebbe Meir, the anpilya shel beged would be acceptable as well. Now we have a source in which it said anpilya shel beged is not acceptable. That can't be Rebbe Meir. That would be according to the Rabbanon. So now we have a source that is a split personality. It's one Tanaic source. Part of it seems to be written by Rebbe Meir, and the other part seems to be written by he who argues on him. Now that can't be. Omar Abaye. So Abaye represents the first approach. He says, Midaseifa Rabbanon Reishonami Rabbanon. From the fact that the Seifa reflects the opinion of the Rabbanon, in which the Seifa said Anpilya Shebeged is posel, the Reisha must also be according to the Rabbanon. Now, what's the problem is, how do you explain according to the Rabbanon that the Kav HaKitea is being kosher? The Reisha, the Mechupa, or the Kav HaKitea, that prosthetic foot is covered in leather. So we're not losing the leather, i.e. animal aspect of the shoe. So the cloth shoe is purely a cloth shoe. That's unacceptable. The kav hakiteh, which we said is basically made of wood, but it's coated with leather. Omar le Rava. So Rava now turns to Abaye with a question. Avol ein mechupar or mai. According to you, if the kav of the kiteh was not covered with leather, what would the din be? Posel. Well, according to you, Abaye, to set up the source, according to the Rabbanan, if it's not covered with leather, then it would not be acceptable. Yachi, if that be the case, Aditani Seifa Bampilu Shel Beged, instead of the Seifa, the end of the source that wants to describe something that's invalid for Chalitza, and it turns to the topic of an Ampilu Shel Beged, the Ampilu made of cloth, that in effect doesn't protect the foot whatsoever. Liflog b'didah. You could have stayed within the topic of the kav of the kiteya and made a distinction therein. In other words, if your goal is to show me cases of something kosher and something not kosher, stay within the case of the kav of the kiteya, the prosthetic foot of the amputee victim. And the source should have said as follows: when is the kav of the kiteya acceptable? When it's coated with leather, or puzzle. But if it's not covered with leather, it's unacceptable. Now, but the source didn't say that. It didn't make that distinction. It must be then that according to this source, the kav hakiteh, even without the covering of leather, is kosher. Now, who would say that? That would be Rebbe Meir. So we're back to the problem. The beginning of the source is Rebbe Meir, and the continuation of the source seems to be according to the Rabbanon. Elo Marova Mida Reisha Rebbe Meir Seifo Nami Rebbe Meir. From the fact that the Reisha, which described the kav hakiteh as being kosher, is Rebbe Meir, the Seifa is also in accordance with Rebbe Meir. Now the question is, according to Meir, why is the Anpilya Shel Beged posel? Answer: Ha Megin v'Hai Lo Megin. The kav hakiteh, that helps to protect the foot of the amputee. The Anpilya Lo Megin, the cloth Anpilya, doesn't protect the foot whatsoever. So as far as Rebbe Meir's standard for what is acceptable and what is not for the shoe for Chalitza, you can see from this discussion that Rebbe Meir requires something that protects the foot. According to Rabbanan, it's much more limited than that. It has to be something that is, we'll say, conforms to Va'analech Tachash. It has to be something that's animal-based. Certainly leather would be acceptable, and possibly expand that a little bit more to animal hairs we saw before to be formed into the straps, but not plant growth according to the Rabbanan.